see a sign that says Peep Show, it doesn't mean that they're letting you look at presents before Christmas.
Quiet on set. And action.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Action Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Sheese, and I'm here with a special guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Cameron.
This week we are talking about everyone's favorite Christmas movie, which is probably definitely not true. I know many people who do not like this movie at all. Elf. Elf came out in 2003. It was directed by Jon Favreau. Many of you may know him as Happy Hogan from Iron Man. It was produced by John Berg, Todd Komarnicki, Shauna Robertson, and co-produced by David Householder. The executive producers were Kent Alterman, Cale Boiter, Julie Wixon-Darmody. These are some interesting names that we got here.
They have the most complicated names possible.
Toby Emmerich and Jimmy Miller.
We love Jimmy Miller. The easiest name of the day.
Easiest name on the list. Elf was written by David Berenbaum. Before we get into how this movie was made, we're going to do a quick overview of the movie.
So, Buddy the Elf, which is played by Will Ferrell, sneaks into Santa's bag one Christmas Eve, bringing him to the North Pole where he is raised by elves. Growing up, Buddy knew he didn't really fit in and finally finds out he is not an elf and is from the city of New York. Buddy then proceeds to go on an adventure to go back to New York and meet his real family. He fights to get along with his father after finding out his mother passed away. The movie portrays him getting accustomed to New York lifestyle and no longer living with elves. After getting a DNA test, Buddy's father, Walter Hobbs, which is played by James Caan, tries to form a relationship with him, dealing with the ups and downs of his job and family life.
Alright, let's get into this. We're going to start with the screenplay, as you cannot have a movie without a script. The script was written by David Berenbaum. He's most well known for his work on Elf. I cannot name any other movie this man has written. Just Elf. Though I know he's written many others.
I don't even know who the man is, so...
Well, now you do.
Now I do!
So, the origins of Elf are actually very interesting. I have quite a bit on the script and the beginnings of this film, and I was actually amazed at how much I found on it, because you never find this much on a script. I've never found this much on a script.
That is probably just a very popular movie.
It is a very popular movie. It is one of the most watched Christmas movies every year.
It's a classic.
It is, yeah. The origins of this film go back to the mid-90s. Berenbaum had moved from the East Coast to LA and began to really miss the East Coast winters. So he surrounded himself with Christmas films, then started writing one himself. The initial idea he had was not Elf, but a film he called Christmas in New Jersey, a rom-com that was never produced. Although the initial idea didn't go anywhere, it opened doors that made Elf possible. His original idea got him in with a whole bunch of different people who all asked him what was next, and that's when he thought of Elf. So this was the second idea he had, and it was the one that got produced. The first one never saw
the light of day.
Only the pages of whatever he wrote it on. He was surrounded by a lot of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer stuff and thought, let's put a human into that situation and environment, and that's kind of the story of Elf. You'll see a lot of similarities between Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Elf, as Buddy is practically the human form of Rudolph.
Yeah, basically.
Quote, I don't remember where I got this quote from, but it's somewhere in, I have everything I used in the description. Mm-hmm. I just don't remember where I got this one from, but he said, he being Berenbaum, said it's Rudolph with a healthy dose of Big, the Tom Hanks movie. Big served as a template for Elf's script in early development, and Berenbaum used Tom Hanks's character Josh Baskin as a guidepost for the character Buddy well before Ferrell even got involved with the film.
Yeah.
The film had a few false starts before Ferrell got involved, and by a few I mean a lot. It was in development like from start to finish for 10 years. And it didn't, oh, I don't know when they actually started producing this film, but it had to have been in 2002 because the film did come out. It either started in late 2002 or early 2003 because the film came out in November of 2003. So from starting the script to the final product of the film was 10 years because of how long it took him to get this film from the page to the screen. Once Farrell got involved in the film, once he was cast in that, the film picked up speed, and Jon Favreau then signed on as director. Now, in 2020, Favreau interviewed with the Rolling Stone, and he said he wasn't initially interested in the script because the original version was actually much darker than the final product that we have today. But according to Berenbaum does not remember his film being dark at all. He remembers it as being lighthearted and cheerful from the beginning. There was a time, like at the time, Berenbaum actually worked for Disney, and his script was something that Disney actually considered making for a while. So he said it was never dark. It was always lighthearted because it was something that Disney considered picking up and making themselves.
Yeah. It could be that some people just have a different view of like what's lighthearted than some people.
Would you like to know exactly what it was?
What?
I originally had this as part of filming, but the ending was much different than the ending we have today, and this kind of contributes to the way that the film was darker. The news reports at the end of the film were originally much larger than what we see in the final film. Like Favreau said, CNN was going to be involved. They were going to use big news stations. That's obviously not what it ended up being. But there were cop cars surrounding Central Park. They were chasing Buddy down Fifth Avenue. They were shooting at him. He was shooting back at them. He ends up on top. He ends up on top of the Empire State Building and ends up jumping off the building onto a helicopter. And that's what the end was originally like, according to Favreau.
That wouldn't have made any sense for a Christmas movie, though.
No.
If it's supposed to be a lighthearted Christmas movie.
See, and that's where it's not lighthearted. Like,
yeah,
does it make sense now?
It makes sense now.
Yeah, it made a lot more sense once I found that.
Once you found that out.
So Favreau got involved in the film, and he actually changed the ending. He made some rewrites and revisions to the script, and we ended up with the film we have today. In the making of this film, Berenbaum was kept involved by the producers, and he got to see Farrell bring his character to life. And he said he couldn't think of a better actor to play Buddy the Elf, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. There is someone else who was considered for the role. We'll come back to it.
Yeah,
I'm sure you know what I'm
that
talking
is
about.
one of the very few things I have.
I'll let you take it, but we'll come back to it. Berenbaum thought that every casting decision that was made by the casting directors and the director himself was actually perfect. He really liked James Caan, Bob Newhart, Ed Asner, and Zooey Deschanel. He liked that they were grounding to the film so that Will Ferrell could run wild to bring Buddy the Elf to life. Because you have to be a wild spirit to bring the elf to life. And in order to keep that wild spirit and the movie, for lack of better words, sane. You need some grounding characters.
I feel like you went with the grounding characters.
But
it was a little.
Yeah, but you have to admit the grounding characters did help. Like those casting choices did bring it down a bit from what it could have been.
I think Will playing a character that's not really sane kind of fits well with characters he usually plays.
It absolutely does.
Yes. I had something about, I guess, technically the screenplay is that apparently David had also wrote it about the relationships between fathers and son in the memory of his own father that passed away.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Considering the storyline that we have. I mean, it was explained pretty well in your overview, the relationship between Buddy and his dad. I do have a few things on that somewhere in the mess that is my notes. So eventually
We'll get there
we'll
eventually.
find it. When Barenbaum watched the film in front of an audience, that's when he realized that he had a big hit on his hands, and he realized that the movie retained its heart from what he originally had to what it ended up being on the big screen. Uh, Based on what I read about the original script, though, I think it has more heart than his original. Just putting that out there.
That's probably why this one came out instead of the original one. Just because there was more behind it. He had help, like, creating that final, tying the whole movie together.
Yeah. Favreau wouldn't have signed on to it if the rewrites were not allowed.
Yeah.
So he said he would do it if he could help to fix, like, rewrite and make some changes to the script, which ended up being really good changes and made for an amazing classic Christmas film. Is there anything else you would like to add to screenplay before I jump into some of the cast?
I thought I had something else, but I don't think I do.
So now we're going to jump into the cast. I do not have the full cast because the cast for this movie is insanely long. So I picked the people from the movie that I knew and put them on the list that I knew were important, or there is one in there that I thought was really funny, so I picked that one too.
Oh, okay. Can't wait.
Yeah. So the casting was done by Susie Ferris. You have Will Ferrell as Buddy, James Caan as Walter. James Caan was also in The Godfather, which, unpopular opinion, I hate that movie. With a passion.
With a passion.
I can make a whole video about why I really don't like that movie. Anyways, James Caan is Walter Hobbs. One of the reasons that Barenbaum thought he was a really good pick for the character Walter was because he was in The Godfather and he was able to keep that like stoic face and emotion whenever Will was doing something absolutely insane.
Which was the entire movie, basically. Yeah.
So he was able to keep his cool and not react much to it. Before I go on, Will Ferrell was not the first actor Barenbaum had in mind for Buddy.
No. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Jim Carrey was originally thought of to be played as Elf, and he just had his doubts about the movie actually being well, so he didn't want to be part of it.
I'm glad it ended up being Ferrell, and Carrey did get his Christmas movie later on as The Grinch, and that's something I'll talk about probably next Christmas.
I think it was a good decision that Jim Carrey wasn't the elf. He's an amazing actor, and he does very well with that, but him playing a happy-go-getting character who is not mentally sane, it was probably best that Will Ferrell.
Yeah. I can't see it. Personally, I cannot see Jim Carrey as Buddy, and
especially since we have him as the Grinch.
Especially because,
that would have been a funny jump from Buddy the Elf to the Grinch.
Yeah. Oh, and I feel like, you know the way he can contort his face.
Yeah.
He has insanely strong facial muscles. I feel like that just does not fit the character Buddy very well at all.
No.
It would just be weird. Love Jim Carrey, but glad he was not cast as Buddy.
Yeah. I feel like he wouldn't be able to make the certain faces that needed to be made for the movie.
Yeah. I agree. But they cast Will Ferrell before he did Elf. He was on Saturday Night Live. And then once he was cast in Elf, he was able to successfully transition from years of being on TV on Saturday Night Live to being on the big screen. It gave him that opportunity to successfully move from TV to film. Elf gave him the boost he needed to get to where he wanted to be. Bob Newhart was cast as Papa Elf. Edward Asner, also known as Ed Asner, was Santa. Zooey Deschanel was cast as Jovi. Daniel Tay as Michael. Faison Love, I don't know if I said his name right. He was the Gimbals manager, the 10 a.m. man. Santa's coming to town.
Santa!
Oh my gosh, I know him.
I know him!
Amy Sedaris as Deb, Artie Lang as the Gimbals Santa, Michael Lerner as Fulton, Andy Richter as Morris, Kyle Gass as Eugene, Leon Redbone as the voice of Leon the Snowman, Claire Lautier as the news reporter Charlotte Denon, Jon Favreau was Walter's doctor,
As
whose
well
name was
as,
Ben.
as well as a lot of the other animals that we see in the North Pole. He voiced a lot of those characters.
Mm-hmm. He voiced all of the animals you see in the opening credits. He actually voiced all of those ones.
Yes.
And Oscar Goncalves as Francisco. And uncredited, I just thought this was important because this is Jon Favreau's son, Max Favreau as young Buddy.
Okay.
I don't know which young Buddy, if he was one of the babies. They had lots of babies just hanging out off set to be baby Buddy, or if it's young Buddy riding around on the bike. I don't know.
I feel like it was probably the young Buddy riding around on the bike, since it had to be like a little special mention.
It is uncredited. It's not like a special mention. He's not mentioned in the credits at all. Like, there are many, many more people in this cast, and if you would like to see the entire cast, I recommend going to IMDb full cast and crew of Elf, because I'm not going into it.
No?
It's really long.
I was going to say, I'm surprised you didn't mention that Ming Ming was played by Ralphie from A Christmas Story.
You know, I didn't actually know that.
You didn't?
No.
I found that out. I forget the actor's name.
We can find out. I actually have it up on my laptop. Peter Billingsley.
Yeah.
He's also uncredited.
Of course. But also, like, going back with changing of cast, originally Zoe Deschanel was not going to be Joey for Elf.
No?
Nope. Apparently, Kate Holmes was the original female lead, and she was going to be doing it until some scheduling conflicts.
I have no idea who Kate Holmes is.
I think I know who she is. I don't know for sure, though, or I would talk about that part. Or Katie Holmes, sorry.
Katie Holmes.
Katie Holmes. I said Kate Holmes. She looks familiar. She's in Batman Begins. Oh, The Giver!
That's yes, what I know her from. I know her from that.
So another thing with Zoe that I have is whenever she auditioned for Elf, she had her blonde hair, which is what we see in the movie, but she had originally dyed that for a different audition for a different movie. And she wanted to change it back to brown, but the producers were like, don't do that, and keep it as blonde for the movie.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have anything else on casting. I have a little bit on costuming.
I have one thing about costuming.
Okay.
And that was just that we already talked about it mainly, but Buddy's costume was modeled after the 1964 Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Mm-hmm. All of the elf costumes were designed with the Rankin Bass Christmas specials in mind. So if you watch those little claymation stop motions, you'll notice a lot of similarities between the costumes that the elves wear in the North Pole and Elf and the costumes that the elves wear in the Rankin Bass Christmas specials. For practical effects, Favreau really wanted to, he didn't want to use a ton of CGI in this film, so a lot of what you see actually is practical effects. He liked using the older techniques to make it feel more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Homey?
I guess that works.
That's not the word you're looking for.
It's not the word I'm looking for, but I think it works.
Okay.
The first one I have is actually, I think, really funny.
Okay.
This practical effect has to do with the Jack-in-the-Boxes. So Favreau had a remote control for that last Jack-in-the-Box that is delayed. Mm-hmm. He had a remote control that would make it pop up and he waited a minute in the back before pushing the button because he wanted Farrell's actual reaction. So what you see in the film actually is his genuine reaction. It did actually scare him because it was delayed and he wasn't expecting it. But he had a little remote control off set to get the reaction he needed for the film.
Which is really funny, because that's definitely a fun little prank you can just do on your go on the people on set.
It's really simple. One thing about the old effects and the practical effects that you see in movies is you could absolutely pull it off on your own with very little money.
Yeah.
Another thing that he used was something called forced perspective. They used this a lot in older movies. So if you've seen Raising Cain, that's a terrible movie too. Anyways, it's not terrible. I didn't like it. That's just my opinion. But if you've seen Raising Cain, that's one of the best movies to watch to see forced perspective. I would say though that Elf is an even better example of forced perspective, simply because you wouldn't notice it unless the seams were pointed out to you, which is exactly what Favreau does in his commentary. He points out exactly where the sets meet, where they become bigger, where they become smaller. He points out the seams in almost every single shot that they do forced perspective in. And then with this forced perspective, they didn't use CGI on very many of the sets to blur or cover up the seam. They just left it to make it look flawed. Like, they wanted it to look flawed to make it feel more real. But for the forced perspective in the North Pole, they made 2 sets of everything. There was a big version of everything and a small version of everything. So the sets were made with one raised and closer and smaller, and then another one was made bigger and further away. So then if you lined them up, you could have one person on one set appear to be much bigger than a person on the other set. And this just helped to exaggerate Will Ferrell's height even more than it already was, because he's a very tall man already. He's over 6 feet, I think. And a lot of the elf actors were already shorter than him, but they did this to exaggerate that and make the elves look much, much smaller than him to make it more realistic. They did not use CGI to paint over anything. I said that already.
Yeah, what I got is the only CGI they did end up using was with the snow.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only thing they used. Everything else, like the animals, were all stop motion kind of stuff. They did not want CGI in this movie at all.
No, they used very little CGI. The snow in the credits, the snowflakes in the credits. And even Favreau, like, he said he didn't even like that it was CGI in the credits. Like, the opening credits.
Yeah.
He didn't like that it was CGI there. There's 3 places that I know of. I don't remember the second one, but they also use CGI for the reindeers when they're flying, because reindeers don't actually fly. Timeless. That's the word I was looking for. I just saw it in my notes. They didn't blur or paint over the lines to make it feel more real and timeless.
Okay.
You know, it's 20 years old this year.
It is.
And they're showing it in theaters again. And I mentioned before that all sets were built twice. They were all built twice at a 2/3 scale. I just feel like that's important, just because it's there. Back to that forced perspective, though, in the beginning when Pop-Up Elf is talking about the 3 different kinds of elves, you know, the bakers and the trees, the shoemakers and the toy makers. That tree that the baker elves make things in is actually a forced perspective tree. So the top half of the tree is a miniature in the foreground, meaning it's up front and closer to the camera, and the bottom half of the tree is 40 feet away. And with this forced perspective, they did actually end up blending the edges together using CGI to make it look more like a tree. That's the 3rd place there's CGI.
Okay.
And the snowball fight, I know of 4, because there's no human that can throw snowballs that fast, so they did it with CGI. Anyways, on with the effects. The stop motion characters that they used, they were shot using 2-frame stop motion. So every time the puppet moved, the character was shot twice to give it a choppy movement and to make it feel like how they looked in the old TV shows that this movie was based on. And the gum Buddy takes off of the fence, that was not gum that they found. That gum was actually placed by the producers. However, not everybody knew that, so the people passing by kind of giving Buddy weird looks. They had no idea that that was placed there for him to take.
There was they also put like a thin layer of plastic over the railing so that way the gum that they put on there didn't actually touch the streets of New York.
That's actually really smart because that would be disgusting.
Yeah, the gum had already been chewed by Farrell. It was Farrell's
his gum.
It was his gum. He didn't eat some random person's gum. Do not recommend. Do not do that.
No, don't do that.
Don't do that, especially not in New York.
If you see gum on the ground, it is not free candy.
What's funny is I mentioned it while we were watching the movie, but Santa literally tells Buddy not to eat the gum off the streets of New York. And what does Buddy do? Eat the gum off of the streets of New York.
Yeah. And then the next one that I have, I don't know if it's the last one that I have or not. It is the last one that I have, so if you have more, you're welcome to add to it after this one. But in the Empire State Building, in the real Empire State Building, because they didn't use the actual Empire State Building. Well, they did, but they used the exterior of it. But in the real Empire State Building, there is not an elevator that has a button for every single floor. The only reason there is a button for every single floor in this elevator that they use is they built it themselves. And they put a button for every single floor on there solely for the purpose for Will to hit every single button. And this movie is definitely the reason that I push all the buttons in the elevator when I get off sometimes.
I think it's just an intrusive thoughts winning with that one. Because I think we've all have done that where we gotten on an elevator and just go psh.
Always. If you ever see a kid doing that, you know where they learned it from.
You know exactly where
I know exactly where they learned that from. So, yeah. Fake elevator. Do you have anything?
I have one thing. I don't know if this is the correct area to be talking about.
That's okay.
But whenever Buddy stays up late to do the room for Santa coming the next day, all that decoration took 2 weeks, and the Lego set that they made took 1 week. And so that fight scene they did, they had to do in one take because it took so long to set up.
I don't think that's the only scene that had to be done in one take. I think I have another one somewhere in here that they had to do in one take.
That scene is amazing, and I applaud the people who made that. Yeah. Because it looks amazing.
And then to watch their work get destroyed.
I would have cried if I were all that hard work I just put in. That's
a lot of hours to just watch
get destroyed in a matter of minutes.
Yeah. I'm always impressed when I see shots or scenes or even whole episodes done with one shot. A few other things, I don't have them written down, but I do know they're out there somewhere. I don't remember where this information is, but I do know Farrell is a method actor. Mm-hmm. So when you see him putting maple syrup in the spaghetti and eating it, that's spaghetti with maple syrup in it. He's actually eating that.
Yeah.
And the spaghetti Pop-Tart chocolate sauce concoction, that's also real. And that did make him very sick.
I think that would make anyone sick.
Oh, yeah.
What I was going to say was, this is already probably a known fact for people, but the scenes of Will Ferrell running around in tights in the New York City, like whenever he first gets there, that was genuine reactions from people on the streets. Like, none of those people were paid actors or anything. They were genuine people that were just living their day in New York. And Will Ferrell was just running up to them and doing all this crazy stuff. And that poor Santa man, who they thought was Santa, just got stopped in the middle of the street and got very confused.
Another thing, when they go to get the DNA test, Khan had no idea Farrell was going to scream. It was one of the crew's ideas to have Farrell scream, and they didn't tell Khan that it was going to happen because he's so good at just keeping his cool and not reacting when Farrell does anything silly like that. So he was actually surprised when Farrell screamed. And there's somewhere in the film where you see Farrell does something again. I don't know if it's this spot where he screams unexpectedly or if it's another spot, but there's somewhere in the movie where if you watch Khan closely, he almost cracks.
Yeah.
Like, Will almost gets him in the middle of the shot. It's interesting.
It's also interesting how the cotton swabs that he eats is actually just cotton candy, just not colored.
Most of the rest of what I have is on our post-production, so editing and stuff. Unless you have anything else to add, I'm just going to jump right into the post-production.
I have this, I guess. So a lot of the story was filmed in a mental hospital, I believe it was. Yeah, and in a mental hospital in Vancouver, or like this hospital in Vancouver, a lot of the scenes, like with Macy's and stuff, was filmed there. And the horror film Jason versus Freddy was filmed at that same place. Like, I think that movie came out like a year or so before Elf, and so it was like that was filmed there, and then Elf was filmed there.
I remember seeing that somewhere. Yeah. Speaking of film locations, I do have more of that, and I do have a little bit about Macy's as well. Would you like me to get into that now, or do you have more you would like to say?
I was just going to also say that the mental hospital cafeteria, the Macy's scenes was mainly just the mental hospital's cafeteria, and that was all I got for that.
Okay. So the film locations, all of the exteriors were shot in New York City. They filmed in Vancouver, Canada. I have the address for the exterior of Walter Hobbs's apartment. If you would like to see it, it's 55 Central Park West, Manhattan, New York. Oh, I do have... Filming took place from December 9th, 2002 to March 7th, 2003. I said earlier that I didn't know if I had it. Anyways, they filmed at Macy's flagship in Manhattan. This was Gimbel's, Rockefeller Center in Manhattan, and the Lincoln Tunnel in New York. They actually did film in the Lincoln Tunnel. Will Ferrell, while they were filming, actually stopped a lot of people just with the way he looked and the way he was acting. A lot of people stopped and were shocked.
Well, yeah, New York is weird, but not that weird.
Anyways, editing. We already went over CGI and how there's literally 3 or 4 places it is in the movie. The scene in Walter's office where he and Buddy bond was originally cut from the film. This is what I was talking about when I said I had stuff on there on the father-son relationship. I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That scene was originally cut from the film, like it wasn't going to be in the final. But the executive producer, Kent Alterman, had the idea to put it back into the film to show the importance of Walter and Buddy getting to know each other and to show that relationship growth.
It wouldn't have made sense if they had cut that, because then they went from like him and Buddy not really getting along to, oh look, now they have a semi-relationship.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
It just wouldn't work.
It wouldn't have worked.
No. I'm gonna jump back to filming because I apparently have more than what I thought I did. So the mailroom set, that was added in late production, and the scene in the mailroom was actually the last scene they shot before production wrapped.
That's a good way to end off.
That is a fun way to end with a party.
With a party.
With a party.
Always go out with a bang.
And the guy that says he's 26 and doesn't actually look 26, that was left in there on purpose. And they had him say that on purpose. Like, that's why it's funny. He doesn't look 26. That's why it's funny. And then when they were shooting the Christmas tree at the Rockefeller Center, the production crew actually had to wait until after midnight to film. And then once they did start filming, they had 4 hours to get everything they needed there done, because the next day a pro skater was coming in to perform there the next day.
Oh, wow.
So all of that was done in 4 hours because of, I don't know who this professional skater was, but they needed the area to perform. So everything was done in 4 hours with that area.
I mean, they did pretty well for only having 4 hours to get all that done.
Mm-hmm. And then this actually is the last thing that I have on filming.
Mm-hmm.
The chase scene with Buddy and Santa had to be done in one take because of how difficult it was to rebuild the set. Is there anything you would like to add?
I think the only other stuff I have is like just how it was being on the set.
Go for it. Talk about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, apparently, from what I have read, Will Ferrell had tension with John Favreau, yeah. Apparently they had some tension on this set, and there was at the premiere for Elf, they were talking, and John had made a comment about how he didn't think Will was he didn't think Will was doing a good job on the set, but now that he saw the movie, he realized that he was actually doing a good job.
Interesting. So he didn't like that Farrell was just going wacko crazy?
Basically.
Until he saw the final product?
Basically, yeah. He just didn't like how I guess Will was kind of insane with the movie, but that was the whole point, was him to be not sane, because he's a 30-year-old man who grew up living with elves and thought he was an elf.
Do you have anything else?
I have one other thing. Was that apparently they talked about doing a sequel for Elf.
Can you pause on that?
Yeah.
And we can come back to
Okay,
it.
yeah.
The score and the soundtrack, the composer was John Debney. Originally in the film, there wasn't going to be much singing. Most of the music was actually added after they heard Zooey Deschanel's singing voice. Favreau liked how quirky but dry she was with her performances, and it gave Farrell more to bounce off of for his performance. The way she performed and the way she sang gave Farrell more to play with, which is really interesting. If Favreau didn't like the way he was acting on set, but he was just giving Farrell more and more to play with.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me. You can't have both things. Pick one. If you recognize the name John Debney, it's because you listened to my Hocus Pocus episode. Debney did a Halloween movie and a Christmas movie.
Whoa.
10 years apart. One more thing. This is for like the audio and the sound. Buddy's burp was not actually Will Ferrell. The burp was actually done by Maurice LaMarche. And it's not actually a burp. He has this really weird, I guess, talent where he can, I guess, fold his tongue a certain way to make it so that his mouth becomes like an echo chamber, and he like does a deep growl and it sounds like a burp.
Okay.
And that's where the 12-second burp came from after Buddy drinks 2 liters of Coke. I do have something, we're going to jump back again. I said I had something about Macy's, and they were going to film with the Macy's name, but Macy's told them that they couldn't do that because they were planning on saying Santa was a fake, saying that the Santa at the store wasn't real, and Macy's wasn't okay with that. They said if you want to film with us and if you want to use our name, then you can't say that Santa is an imposter and that he's fake. So they made the choice and decided that the scene was more important than filming with Macy's, and they did gimbals instead. I think it's funnier with gimbals.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's 100% funnier with gimbals.
And then before we go into your sequel, I'm going to go over just the first the box office and then the awards, and then you can talk about your sequel. So this movie was released on November 7th, 2003, and it ran through in theaters until March 4th of 2004. The domestic box office was $173,398,518. The international was $47,044,933, and combined they made the worldwide $220,443,451. Usually I have a rough estimate of how much the movie cost to make. I didn't even think to look for that this time.
Do you want me to look it up while you're talking?
Sure. Now, here's something that's kind of crazy. When I was looking for the awards and stuff for this film, I fully expected it to have far more wins and nominations than it has. This list has a total of 9 wins and nominations together. So we're going to go over all of them.
I found the price. If you want to know.
Yes.
So apparently it cost $33 million to make. It's a lot of money.
On with the awards. For the ASCAP Film and Television Music Awards, John Debney in 2004 won the ASCAP award. I don't know what that means.
No
I've
idea.
never heard of that award in my life, but it's a music award. In 2005, Elf was nominated for Best Youth DVD at the Satellite Awards. In 2004, it was nominated for the Favorite Movie at the Kids' Choice Awards. In 2004, Will Ferrell was nominated for Best Comedic Performance at the MTV Movie Plus TV Awards. And in 2004, Elf was nominated for Choice Movie Comedy, and Will Ferrell was nominated for Choice Movie Actor in Comedy at the Teen Choice Awards. In 2004, Elf won the Best Comedy at the Golden Trailer Awards. And in 2004, Elf was nominated for Best Live Action Family Film and Best Use of Previously Published or Recorded Music at the Phoenix Film Critics Society Awards. So now that we've done box office and awards, I like to end it with the social impact and things that it's brought about. So there's a couple things. First of all, Elf is watched more times every year than just about any other 21st century film. It is one of the most watched Christmas movies and one of the most watched movies from 21st century film. It has a lot of different reimaginings. One of them in 2014 is a TV special called Elf, Buddy's Musical Christmas. And, I haven't watched it. I've watched a little trailer, and it appears to be it looks like it's stop motion.
Yeah.
Like claymation stop motion.
Mm-hmm.
With CGI. These characters don't have real mouths. They're CGI'd mouths and eyeballs and everything.
It's terrifying.
It's kind of scary. Again, I have not seen it. I've only seen the trailer. But, from what I have seen, it's a choice.
It was made, and I'm honestly surprised, because you said it was Jim Parsons who voiced.
Yes.
I'm surprised Jim Parsons agreed to it,
yes.
Honestly.
Jim Parsons is the voice of Buddy in this musical Christmas thing that was made
and we love Jim
in
Parsons.
2014.
Jim Parsons is great. Questioning why he agreed to record this, or why someone thought this was going to be a good idea.
The world may never know. In 2022, there was an Asda Christmas advert. Have no idea what that is. I just know it exists. And in 2010, there was actually a Broadway musical that was made based off the movie. You can find the entire soundtrack to it on Spotify. I have listened to the entire thing. It's actually really funny.
Yeah.
I was gonna do some research into it for this episode, but I decided not to. Instead, I think I'm going to do some research and make a video for my YouTube channel about it, so keep an eye out for that on the Action Podcast YouTube channel. And earlier you brought up a sequel. I'm gonna let you talk about that, and then we'll close off this episode.
I honestly don't have anything about the sequel except that Farrell had turned it down because he didn't really like the idea he didn't like the idea of doing it again, like being a grown man running around in tights in New York City. Mm-hmm. And he just couldn't promote it from an honest place, and he wanted to put 100% into the movie, and he just felt like he couldn't do that.
Yeah. I also heard about that sequel that he didn't want to make a sequel because the first one already ended so well. Mm-hmm. And he didn't want to add to the story. with another movie.
I feel like there wasn't much to add to the story though.
There's not.
Because at the end we see that that Buddy and Jovi get together. They obviously get married and they have their kid, and Buddy still goes visits his Papa Elf back up in the North Pole. He was still living in New York with his family, but still visiting his family up in North Pole. So it makes sense that it didn't have a sequel. As nice it would have been just to see that story again and see the characters come back to life. It's good because there wouldn't have been a good story to tell with it.
I agree. I don't think there would be. There's really nowhere else for it to go. If you ask me, I think it ended really well, and I just don't think I don't think a sequel would do well. That's all that I have on Elf. If you have anything else you would like to share, you're more than welcome to.
I don't think I have anything else.
Well, in that case, we'll close off this episode. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed doing research for this episode, I'm going to be honest. I didn't have a ton of time to do it because for some reason I'm just insanely busy all the time. I had a lot of fun doing this episode, though. Thank you for joining me.
Of course.
Follow our socials. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at actionpodcast.cs. I post some fun stuff there. You can also find Action on YouTube at Action Podcast. And you can listen to this podcast literally anywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music has it too. It's everywhere. Listen to it. Share it with your friends and family. And thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you all next week.
It's gloomy and its atmosphere has called it quits. Then you must remember that December is a time for glitz. Never stop until each lamb on your Christmas tree is sparkling, jolly, twinkle, jingly. Pick up every ornament that's sitting, waiting on a shelf. While you're busy decorating, why not decorate yourself? Soon you'll bring a smile to